Part 99. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 985. The so-called reward soon arrived in everyone's hands, a small pink test tube with pink liquid inside, which was still bubbling slightly. There is a line of words marked on the outside of the test tube, Standard Nutrient Solution. This is a nutrient solution used to quickly restore physical energy. You can drink it immediately, or you can save it and wait for an opportunity to drink it again. The inspector explained calmly. The second speed test soon began. Another obelisk rose from the ground, slowly standing in front of everyone. Yiling stared at the wild beast in Longian with cold eyes. The opponent's injuries had all been healed and he was showing her a provocative and ferocious expression. Compare, she raised her eyebrows and said loudly. You think I'm afraid of you? The mad beast was entangled before and couldn't breathe. Now it's time to collect some interest. The two walked into an obelisk one after another and disappeared. Then March and Ruela walked into an obelisk together, obviously still tit for tat. Wei Di from the Nine Owls faction entered one alone. Joey, however, glanced around the crowd and suddenly found Garen mixed in with a group of other factions. This kid actually passed the test? What a blessing, he couldn't help but smile. Do you really think we are really looking for him to cooperate? What's wrong, Joey? A fair-skinned beauty next to her asked in a low voice. It's okay, just an idiot who overestimates his abilities, Joey disagreed. But Wei began to pay attention to Garen. The woman followed his previous line of sight and saw Garen. It's him, she understood. I heard that he was originally a genius introduced from the central government, but he has not performed outstandingly for so long, and everyone who originally paid attention to him has given up. Originally, if he could break through within 3 years, if so, it might be absorbed into the preparatory 3-heart seed, but it's a pity that it took him 5 years. The woman's intelligence seemed to be very good, and she revealed the details of Garen in just a few words. It's not bad. It takes 5 years to reach level 4, Joey said calmly. It would take an average person more than 10 years. You also said that he is an ordinary person, and the standards are different. And he is now over 25 years old. The woman shook her head. The genius before is now lost to everyone. This is fate. If you and I don't work hard, soon I will be like him. Let's go take a look. Joey walked towards Galen's location. Garen happened to walk into an obelisk next to him, and the two of them followed him into the obelisk with great interest. The speed test was in the same similar space, and it was also the same large crystal stone wall with a faint green fluorescent light on it, making the entire black stone hall a light green. As someone came in, a line of writing appeared on the surface of the crystal stone wall. You can pass the standard if your movement speed reaches the standard at any point in this space. Move 1 standard meter toward the crystal expansion. There is no standard value for reaching the standard, and no specific limit is given, it is just this sentence. A standard meter is 200 meters in length. Without any delay, the first person started, sprinting directly towards the crystal. A value was clearly displayed on the crystal wall he was sprinting against, 0.5 standard meters per second. Failed. The man seemed to have expected it. There was no surprise. He just sighed and stood aside to wait for his companion to continue the test. Garen mingled in the crowd and watched the energy masters go out one by one. Many of them passed the test. Most of the energy masters attached great importance to their speed because they wanted to escape for their lives. This is completely different from relative strength. In this obelisk, there were only more than 20 people who came in, but only 2 people were eliminated because they did not meet the standards, and the rest actually passed. The same goes for Garen, he has just reached the level required to clear the level 1.1 standard. Look. The last 2 Joeys also appeared, but their speed was much stronger than Garen, actually reaching 2 standards. Turning back from the crystal stone wall, Joey glanced at the expressionless Garen again and shook his head. Originally, I was worried that he had something extraordinary, but now it seems that it is just unnecessary. Recalling the 2 space rings that I had obtained earlier, the various resources contained in them were enough for me to sprint to the next level. As long as I entered at the 5th level, it was another step to put some distance between him and Garen. When he wanted to catch up, he wouldn't even think about it for 7 or 8 years. Joey suddenly felt that his previous worries were unnecessary. Forget it, let's go. It seems that this guy is similar to those in the middle. He's just good at the beginning, but not so good later, he said calmly. The woman nodded and glanced at Garen with contempt. They civilian weapon masters have come up step by step on their own. Compared with the 2nd-generation ancestors like Garen and other energy masters who rely on talent, they may be a little behind at the beginning, but they will surpass them more and more in the future. Whether it is perseverance, experience, or fighting instincts, etc., they are far beyond these squeamish so-called geniuses. Garen gently wiped the sweat from his forehead and temples with paper. He had expected that he could barely pass the level with all his speed. His speed originally just reached the critical point. Most of the energy masters passing by now are faster than him. This is also a matter of course. As for Joey and the 2, he also saw it, but it didn't matter. Although he was unhappy with Joey's previous monster grabbing, there was no chance of revenge now. Getting the reward first is the best reward. The 3rd level is resistance, and almost no weapon masters are defeated in this. All energy mechanics have lived in an environment dealing with radiation for a long time, and there is no doubt that they have no problem with their own resistance. The seemingly terrifying bubbling corrosive liquid in the biochemical pool used for testing is not a problem for energy mechanics. I just went down and took a shower with my clothes on. Only the last one, resilience. In terms of resilience, it seems that the winner will be decided between the 3 of us. Yu smiled lightly and looked at the other 2 people. In the Silver Sphere space, Chixu sect and others gathered together to face off against Longian sect and Juxiao sect and others. The best essence must be mine. Wei Di's face from the 9 Owls faction did not change, and he still looked calm and calm. But there was a hint of absolute confidence in his tone. Well, maybe, there might be an energy master who will suddenly surpass us and get the essence, maybe. Longian Rula sneered and stared at Yu. He knew that he couldn't get it in this regard. But he can't get it, and people like March can't even think of it. This time he led the team out, but was unexpectedly attacked by Qi Shui and caused such heavy losses. If he didn't repay Qi Shui's people, he would feel bad. Then it depends on each person's ability. March still kept smiling, with a confident demeanor and a handsome face and figure. Not only the female masters of the sect were attracted, but also other outside sects and individual practitioners were impressed by him. Very nice. The final test begins, resilience, the inspector said calmly. The test method is very simple. As long as you can persist under the corrosive light for long enough, you will be able to get a considerable score. Those who pass the first test can get a perfect genetically modified fluid of any type, all of which are masterworks, and the strongest one will get the essence of genetically modified fluid, which can be improved by 2 standard units. 2 standard units. Oh my god. Essence, if this were sold, it would cost at least tens of millions of crystals. It is indeed a ghost mothership. You must get it. The originally tepid atmosphere among the able mechanics below was suddenly ignited by these words, and it instantly turned into an environment like a noisy vegetable market. Among them, those who are most likely to get the essence are naturally the 3 strongest people in the 3 levels, Rula, March, and Wade. These 3 people are all masters at the top of the 5th level, and they have accumulated a lot of accumulation, and have reached the peak of transformation in all aspects. It can be said that as long as they are serious, almost no one here can surpass them. Rula glanced at the roaring energy masters with disdain, and then glanced at March provocatively. He had made up his mind that even if he couldn't pass, March wouldn't be able to pass either. The battle between the Chixu sect and the Longian sect has become so intense that they don't even bother to hide it. March didn't take it seriously and was the first to walk towards the obelisk that had just appeared. This time he didn't walk in, but stood right in front of it. The others also got ready and walked to the obelisk. Some people who had never participated before started to get nervous. The inspector smiled and raised his hand. Swish, swish, swish. In an instant, hundreds of white beams of light fell from the sky and landed accurately on the ground, gently wrapping and enveloping every energy master. "Don't be nervous," the inspector said softly, but his voice naturally reached the ears of every energy mechanic. "Everyone will start the test at the same time. The longer you persist, the more benefits you will get. This is a test, it's also a replenishment, so you should seize the opportunity." There were only a few hundred people left. When they heard the inspector's words, most of them remained silent, while a small number of people were slightly excited. They seemed to know something about this test. Some even put their own. The energy weapons were released and tested together. The inspector saw this and nodded slightly. After glancing at the three best people, the three leaders of the energy masters stood in a triangle shape, facing each other tit for tat. Their respective force fields faintly emitted, squeezing away all the energy masters around them. The inspector nodded secretly, guessing that it was one of these three people who could get the essence this time. "I count 3, 1, 2, 3. Start." Boom. After a muffled sound, the white beam suddenly turned into light red. Garen also stood in a beam, feeling the red light falling, and his body suddenly shook slightly. A warm and soft feeling suddenly filled the skin all over his body. But the moment this feeling occurred, the secret weapon seeds of life suddenly sounded an alarm to his consciousness. Garen then observed carefully and noticed that this warm and soft feeling was just the nerves being paralyzed. In fact, his skin was being corroded by some kind of force bit by bit. "I've never been afraid of anyone compared to my recovery power." Hearing that there was an essence that could be obtained, Garen also had some thoughts in his mind. He was not as good as others in the other scores, but in this one, he was confident that no one else could. "Will be stronger than him. Maybe I can catch up with the scores of other items, and maybe get the essence in the end. If you don't fight for some things, forget it if you don't have the ability. If you don't fight for something if you have the ability, it will slow down your progress, which is unreasonable." After making up his mind, Garen slowly fell into the optimal state of adjusting his body for recovery. The powerful recovery power of the secret weapon of life, the terrifying recovery from the 4.7 physique, was fully demonstrated by Garen. Time passed by minute by second, and the intensity and concentration of the red light was slowly increasing. About 10 minutes later, an energy mechanic was the first to stumble out of the beam and looked back at the others with a bitter look on his face. He was actually the worst, which immediately had a deeper blow to his already low confidence. With the first one came the second, and soon, the third, the fourth. More and more energy masters were thrown out in about 15 minutes. The corrosive power of red light has also reached a relatively strong level. Continuously corroding human skin, and then allowing the self-healing ability of the organism to fight and resist this corrosion, this is the content of the test. Sanya glanced at Ruula provocatively, who looked at him with an ugly face as he saw that 3 disciples of his Longian sect had been thrown out, while the Chixu sect only had 1 person so far. Seeing March's triumphant eyes, his lungs were about to explode. "It's too early to be proud now," he whispered coldly. The two of them looked in the direction of the Juxiao faction, but they suddenly discovered that no one from the Juxiao faction had been eliminated until now, and they were suddenly shocked. The first wave passed unbearably, and time passed by minute by second. Soon, the radiation concentration of red light had reached a new qualitative change point. Bang! Bang 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 bang! In an instant, almost at the same moment, most of the people in the Red Snow sect and the Longian sect were thrown out. The Longian sect, which didn't have many people in the first place, was almost thrown out. Ruela stared at Yu with a livid face. If they hadn't been attacked and killed before, and the few people who had the strongest resilience also died among them, how could they have reached such a miserable state? The few people who were ejected from the Longian Pi all looked ugly and had no luster on their faces. But when they looked in the direction of Chixu, they found that their faces were not very pretty either. Most of Chixu's people were staring at the Nine Owls faction. These people turned their eyes and discovered to their shock that only 4 of the 10 people in the Nine Owls faction had been thrown out, and most of them were still holding on. It's dangerous. It would be really fun if the essence that the two sides are fighting for is taken away by the Nine Owls faction. Chixu and Longian are the strongest, while Juxiao faction is just neutral, not as powerful as either of them. In the past, Chixu and Longian have always had the advantage, with almost no exceptions, but this time, Juxiao faction seems to be well prepared. Come on, I really plan to compete for the first place this time. Everyone, go all out. Yu also felt that the situation was a bit troublesome. Juxiao was not as strong as himself and others. He had never lost to them before. If he lost this time, he would be humiliated if he went back. Yiling, Joey and others were still insisting, and there were 2 masters who were second only to March and at the same level as Yiling. They originally wanted to look indifferent, but after hearing the sound transmission, they started to become serious at this time. Possible squeal loss. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 986. There were only 3 people left on Ruela's side who were still insisting. He also whispered to the other 2 people, Mad Beast and another woman, obviously asking them to insist on it. The situation suddenly became suspenseful. Time passed slowly again. The energy masters of other schools gradually withdrew, and the third wave of qualitative changes began immediately. The red light trembled fiercely. Bang 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 bang. There were more than 10 muffled sounds in a row, and more than a dozen energy masters were thrown out one after another. Their skin was red, as if their skin had been peeled off, and they looked shocking. Most of these 10 people are Sens and other sects of energy masters, and some from the Chixu sect were also thrown out. There are only 5 people left who are persisting. These 5 people are March, Yiling, Joey, and 2 other masters. These are the top-ranked disciples of Peak Master Erkson. But their faces also looked a little uncomfortable. Apart from this, there are only a few rare masters among the rest of the team of masters who can still persist on the field. But at this time, everyone's attention was focused on the 3 major factions. They are the real key to winning the championship. Another 10 minutes passed. This time the qualitative change of red light begins again. There was a muffled buzzing sound, and the red light doubled in concentration instantly. Puff! Joey and the other master couldn't bear it at the same time. They spurted out a mouthful of blood, staggered and were ejected from the beam, and ended sadly. The beautiful magician who was with him quickly went up to help Joey. Are you okay? It's not just that it's too much consumption. Joey shook his head, stood up straight, pushed away the woman's support, and looked at the Juxiao faction again. His eyes suddenly froze slightly. How can it be? He couldn't help but cry out in a low voice. Actually, most of the people from the Nine Owls faction still remain. There are still 8 people left holding on. This. Joey was also speechless. Looking at the expressions of the 8 people, no one showed too much burden, and they were all peaceful. Looking at the slight fluctuations emanating from their bodies, they all have level 4. Nine Owl faction, what do you want to do this time? Joey suddenly felt that this faction that had always been low-key and neutral seemed to be faintly showing its edge. Thinking about it carefully, Juxiao has always hidden his strength and has never been involved in the fight between Red Snow Longian. Almost no one has seen their senior brother Yexiao take action, and he always goes to the void battlefield alone. He lives alone, no one knows what his strength is. It's so well hidden. Joey took a slight breath of air. Now I can only watch senior brother march. The woman also thought of this and her face changed color slightly. If we lose to Zhu Xiao's people, we will be in real trouble when we go back this time. Those who lose to Longjian can do it, but Zhu Xiao's people have always been weaker than the two factions, giving people the impression that they have been weak for a long time. They are just a relatively large weight between the two factions of Red Snow Longjian. The loser give it to a force that I have never looked up to. If only the face-loving elders in the sect knew about it. Wei Di stood calmly in the beam of light, his expression indifferent. On the contrary, several people around him looked proud, looking up at the other two groups with ugly expressions. Let's see who can have the last laugh. March stared at Wei Di coldly. Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, a master female mechanic next to him was ejected in shame. This made Sanyu's face darken and she was completely speechless. The essence is mine. Wade opened his eyes and spoke calmly. There are also genre comprehensive point rewards, which are also ours. Buzz. At this time, there was another qualitative change of red light, and this time the red light radiation was twice as strong again. In an instant, everyone except the three leaders were ejected at the same time. But at this moment, a slender woman from the Nine Owl sect was thrown away. She let out a low roar and her whole body deformed slightly. Her chest bulged high, and a pair of ferocious black horns sprouted out after being pulled apart. Bent downward. The whole person's body shape also suddenly changed from 1.7 meters to more than 2 meters. Became tall and thin. This transformation actually allowed her to stabilize her body again and stand in the beam again. At this moment, Sanyu and Ruela's expressions instantly changed. Not only them, but also everyone from Longjian and Jixia couldn't help but look ugly. As for the other martial art masters from other schools who were popped up, they were even more stunned. Many people had never even heard of this kind of transformation. What kind of method is this? It can actually increase such a strong recovery ability all at once. It's the snake demon gene. The snake demon physique modified by gene implantation. It's actually a genetically modified fluid with properties. It's so powerful. This snake demon gene should be born, not implanted. Someone had a vicious eye and saw the problem directly. A natural snake monster? Amazing. How many years has this natural mutant physique appeared in our state? Zhu Xiao has been cultivating it for so many years without saying a word. Then what do they mean by taking it out now? Do they think they don't have to hide it anymore? Someone asked in a low voice. Maybe he thinks he doesn't need to hide anymore. Some people came to a somewhat unbelievable conclusion. Both March and Ruela's hearts sank a little. They all know the value of the genetic fluid essence. If it is taken away by Zhu Xiao's people, it will not only be a matter of money, but also a blow to this reputation. The people of Zhu Xiao are rising to power through their names. For a genre, fame and prestige are very important. With reputation, a large number of outstanding talents will come to you. Their talents will become stronger with each passing generation. If fame is insufficient, the strongest talents will naturally not choose the second genre. Then when you come to Kitsumi Prefecture, you will naturally not choose between two factions. In this way, one generation is weak, the other is weak, and each generation is inferior to others. Of course, the result will not be so serious, but for some unknown reason, when they see Zhu Xiao's actions, they can't help but have such thoughts in their minds. Buzz. Suddenly, another qualitative change began. This time, the girl from Zhu Xiao was knocked away and vomited a mouthful of blood, but this result was already very impressive in terms of the total points of the school. March's face was ugly. There was not much difference between the three of them. It was very difficult to gain enough points for the genre. The other party had one more woman who had persisted until now. The result was self-evident. This time they recovered. Force, they will probably lose. If he can't widen the gap with Wade next time, then looking at Zhu Xiao's quiet style of doing things this time, they might really be able to steal the essence. He gritted his teeth, and even they began to feel difficult due to this qualitative change. But if he doesn't persist, the school's face will be lost in his hands this time. It will be a big loss if he goes back. The elder's opinion of him will also be greatly affected. If he doesn't have a good opinion, he wants to work under the elder. A fantasy. In the most conspicuous position on the stage, only 3 people were still holding on. The red light coaxed it and became rich again. Finally, Rula was the first to be unable to bear it any longer, and was thrown out with a bang, hitting the ground of the space hard, leaving a long black mark. The disciple who tried to hold him up was also knocked away and let out an ouch. Rula stood up, his force field flashing with arcs and red light from time to time. He gritted his teeth and stared at March and Wade. At this point, he had to admit that his resilience was indeed weaker than the two of them. Damn. Let's see how long you can hold on. Not long after, March also failed. His face became bloodshot, and it seemed that he might be thrown out at any time. And Wade also frowned slightly, obviously reaching his limit. Buzz. Finally, there was another qualitative change, and the red light suddenly showed signs of turning black. Bang bang. After 2 crisp sounds, Wade and Yu were thrown out at the same time. The difference between them was only 2 seconds. It's over. Seeing this scene, everyone from Longian and Chixu felt their hearts drop to the bottom of their heart's content. Even if it is obtained by either of the 2 factions, it is better than Zhu Xiao, but the current result is that Zhu Xiao's disciples have persisted the longest, and Wade is about the same as the other 2 leaders. Calculated in this way, the total points of the faction are completely no choice. And the rewards brought by the total points will no longer be available. Bang. March punched the ground hard, his expression extremely ugly. This time he lost the total points to Zhu Xiao. Maybe his application for promotion to the 3 heart resources after returning will be seriously affected. Once affected, it will affect him. A lifetime of destiny. He is already over 200 years old. As long as he cannot break through the resonance level by the time he is 300 years old, there really is nothing he can do. The atmosphere fell into complete embarrassment and dullness for a while. Only Zhu Xiao's people were smiling. They performed well this time. Wade also had a rare smile. Inspector Rula looked at the inspector who was sitting cross-legged with a gloomy face. He was closing his eyes and concentrating, as if he didn't care about the competition between the 3 factions. May I ask about the points ranking this time? As soon as these words came out, they immediately attracted everyone's attention. It seems that Chixu and Longian are going to be in trouble this time. Zhu Xiao's sudden success will exceed everyone's imagination. It seems that Zhu Xiao is going to make a big difference this time. Hey, there's something good to watch. Some people whispered, but more people secretly hid their thoughts in their hearts and watched the show silently. Unexpectedly, the inspector didn't even open his eyes, and seemed not to hear Rula's inquiry at all. Inspector Sanyu also stood up, his face was extremely gloomy and he spoke in a low voice. May I ask about the results this time? He knew he lost, but if he didn't dare to face failure, it would be an even greater failure. Why panic? There are still people who are not done yet. The inspector opened his eyes and replied impatiently. What? March was stunned, as if he heard something wrong. You heard that right, the inspector didn't bother to say more. There are still people, it's not over yet. There are still people who haven't finished yet. March was stunned. Rula was stunned. The 3 major factions were stunned. Wade opened his eyes wide, and the smile on his face froze for a moment. The joy of the disciples, brothers, and sisters around him suddenly froze. There's someone else. The energy masters below were in an uproar. This was simply a miracle. It's been a long time, and there's still no one left. Is it possible? Is this possible? Are you sure the inspector is not joking? The whole place fell silent. No one would doubt that the inspector was wrong. They were wondering if they were hallucinating or hearing things. A bunch of idiots, the inspector raised his hand impatiently. Buzz. Beside an obelisk in the distance, a beam of red light was always on behind everyone. At this time, it actually persisted and did not disappear. Following the inspector's move, everyone suddenly saw clearly the red light beam behind them. Wow! In an instant, the entire square turned into a sea of noise. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 987. This kid. It's him. Behind Yu, Yiling's eyes were straight, looking in disbelief. The same goes for Joey. No one would have thought that Garen would persist in the end. Ruela's face was solemn, staring at Galen in the beam, and she didn't know what she was thinking for a while. Several people behind him were also talking quietly, and two of them seemed to recognize Garen's face. It's that person. He's from the Chixu sect. A disciple stepped forward and whispered beside Ruela. Red Snow sect. Ruela narrowed her eyes and glanced at Yu. Sure enough, there was a faint smile on Yu's face at this time. It's just that my resilience is better. Is it worth being so happy? When he thought that the overall points must be won by the Chixu faction, he felt uneasy. Yeah, it's just a little better. It's really not worthy of being so happy. I just want to curl up at the corner of my mouth. Why do you have any objections? Sanyu replied with a chuckle. After the previous shock, a group of people quickly adjusted their emotions. After all, they were all experienced martial arts masters, and their ability to control themselves was very good. The only exception was Wade, who still had a calm expression on his face and remained unmoved by Garen's persistence. It's just that his expression froze just now. At this time, it quickly returned to normal. Time passed by, and Garen sat in the beam, his eyes closed, unaware of what was happening in the outside world. He was just concentrating on observing the effect of corrosive radiation on the surface of his body. If he persisted until now, he was sure to win the first place, but this only refers to the recovery power alone, and the other items were not necessarily certain. So he must distance himself from others in this aspect. The Cold Hell Peacock technique's physique is very powerful, especially its resilience is terrifying. He can vaguely absorb a small part of the corrosive radiation from the outside world with the devouring ability of the Peacock technique, and convert it into his own energy. Time passed by minute, and more than 10 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. A group of people stared at Garen, finally seeing signs that he was unable to hold on. His skin was a faint reddish color, and his forehead was slightly sweaty. Sanyu stared at Garen closely while listening to the introduction to him by the disciple behind him. This man's name is Garen. He came in with Joey and Yiling as a team. He has good talent. He was also introduced from the central city in the past. At the beginning, even the elder disciple San Xian personally went to pick him up. But recently, because of the breakthrough speed was a bit slow, and it was ignored for a while, but I didn't expect it to suddenly appear again now. Garen, March nodded, this time he saved the defeat by himself. After it's over, you go ask him to come over and be with us. He didn't care how Yiling and the others separated from Garen. But at least now Galen has won glory for everyone and stabilized the first place team ranking, which needs to be directly attracted. Okay, the disciple nodded. Bang. At this moment, Garen finally couldn't hold on anymore. A red light shot out, and he staggered back more than 10 steps on the ground. After absorbing the huge force, he stabilized his body and opened his eyes with a flushed face. The first round of testing is over. At this time, the inspector stood up and spoke in a low voice. Start distributing rewards now. He raised one hand, and a small black ball suddenly shot out from his hand. The ball split into 3 parts in mid-air, and then the 3 parts split into hundreds of parts again, and each shot towards the energy still below. Shoot it out of the mechanic's hand. Tisk tisk tisk. Black light drew out black trajectory lines one after another and fell into the hands of every energy master. Almost at the same time, everyone got their own prizes. March, Wadey and Rula, the 3 of them are all perfect versions of the genetically modified fluid. I don't know what properties it has modified, and the expressions on their faces are all different. But at this time, they are not paying attention to the transformation fluid in their hands. Although this thing is precious, they are not without it. What they are more concerned about now is the reward for first place, the transformation essence. Sure enough, that guy got it, Rula snorted coldly. From the disciple's story just now, he also knew that Garen was probably one of the murderers who killed 2 talented disciples of their sect before. At this time, I felt even more unhappy when I saw my enemy winning the prize. Yiling and Joey stared at the test tube of light red liquid in Galen's hand from a distance, with a hint of uncontrollable desire in their eyes. Senior brother Yu, Yiling stepped forward and whispered behind Yu, it is impossible to absorb the genetically modified essence for a while. It needs to be slowly diluted and absorbed for at least half a month, and the general physique cannot reach the level. There is no way to absorb it, and its effect on Galleons is far less than it is on senior brother. It is better for us to buy it from him. With enough money, he can also buy the appropriate genetic fluid, and senior brother can also get the appropriate transformation essence. This is not good. Yu obviously wanted to do so, with a look of emotion on her face, but her words remained awkward. It doesn't matter, as long as the price is equal to Galleons, Yiling said with a slight smile. It sounds like everyone gets what they need, which is beneficial to both parties. If it's not convenient for senior brother to do this, we can do it. March pondered for a moment, looked at Galen who was observing the test tube in his hand, and said nothing. After a while, he sighed. Go, remember, never treat junior brother Jialong badly. Junior sister understands. A smile appeared on Yiling's face. This bitch in March promised on the surface, but in fact he didn't even give a clear price. He made it clear that he wanted Yiling to advance the money himself. On the surface, he said he wouldn't treat Galleons badly. In fact, this bitch was extremely stingy. If it really happened, get a great price point and this guy will never take your money. Yiling cursed in her heart, but this time in order to please March, she helped her in a crucial test, so she could only endure the pain and bleed. She quietly winked at Joey on the side, and the 2 of them walked directly towards Garen from the side. At this time, Garen had left the crowd and walked to an obelisk on the edge to sit down, waiting for the second phase of the test. Seeing the 2 people approaching, a cold look flashed in his eyes. Especially Joey, who had robbed him of his trophies before, but now he came over and didn't know what he wanted to do. What's the matter with you 2? He said directly without waiting for the 2 to stand still. If it's okay, you can leave. I still need to rest here for the next test. Don't say that, Joey chuckled, we are a group of companions. It's unreasonable to say this. Captain Yiling is here to give you a big favor. A favor? Garen smiled and said non-committally, speak directly if you have something to say, don't waste time. Without further ado, senior brother Yu wants to buy your genetically modified essence. Please set a price, Yiling said impatiently. There are some disciples like Garen in the section. For ordinary disciples, it may be elite, but for old disciples like them, there are many such disciples. Every year, at least 10 people are sent from the capital of Nagadeko, and there are only a few who can really break out. Others, not to mention, She herself was originally sent from the Nagatico capital to recruit talents, but now she is still stuck at the 5th level, unable to make any progress. The further you go, the harder it is for an energy mechanic to make progress, especially after level 5. The resources that need to be consumed step by step are simply astronomical. In addition, the resources consumed may not necessarily lead to a breakthrough. The requirements for computing power are ridiculously high. To achieve the 3 hearts is simply a big threshold for qualitative change. It's normal to be stuck for hundreds of years if you're not careful. Even if it goes well, don't even think about rushing in quickly without a few decades. Even if Galen is talented and everything goes well, it will take at least 10 years or more to break through to level 5, not to mention that there is a gap in level 5. By the time Galen rose, she would have already reached the resonance level. Generally speaking, if you want to reach the resonance stage at level 5, you might as well forget it if you don't have hundreds of years. So she wasn't afraid of offending Garen at all. The 5th level of a mechanist is not the 5th level of a pilot. When a mechanist reaches level 5, one is equivalent to at least 2 level 5 mecha masters. The combat effectiveness of the experimental subject comes with a level 5 force field, and can even reach resonance level combat effectiveness. There is simply no way a pilot can fight against it. Essence of transformation fluid. Garen raised his eyebrows slightly. Sorry, I'm not selling. He never felt very good about these two people. Although he was brought out of the school by the two of them, he was tricked by them along the way. There was no sympathy at all, and there was still no place to vent his resentment. Do you still want to come over and buy the essence in his hand? You can't absorb this stuff. The concentration is too high. It's better to choose a lower level genetic fluid that is more helpful to you. In this way, I will pay 2 million crystal stones. Yi Ling frowned. 2 million, Garen smiled. The price of the essence was already in the tens of millions. Does this woman want to buy the essence for 2 million? I really think he is a soft persimmon. What? Too little. Yi Ling did intend to lower the price, so that she could earn part of the price difference. 2 million is not bad. Once you go out without our protection, do you think you can safely take it back to the base? How many people are now eyeing this thing in your hand? She sneered. Yes, you have to understand that without our protection, you can easily be targeted and dealt with, Joey said with a smile from the side. You can leave. I won't sell it. Garen shook his head. What a joke, he would be stupid if he sold it at this price. Not to mention that he can use this thing. The previous choice was the speed modification fluid. As an energy mechanic, life preservation is the first priority. The essence of the speed modification fluid can increase 2 standard units at a time. This is simply a terrifying bonus point. Compared with the potential point bonus, he can completely use it. This way you can improve your physical fitness. Unfortunately, it can only be used once per level. Junior brother Jialong, this is what senior brother Yu means. Yi Ling's face looked a little ugly. This is not the first time she has done this kind of thing. Most of them have been successful. Usually the reason for failure is because the other party has a background. But this guy Garen is a newcomer who has just started working for a few years and has no background. He dared to talk back to them head on. If you help senior brother this time, senior brother March will definitely remember your favor. We will also remember your favor this time. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 988. I want to buy more than 10 million worth of genetic essence for 2 million. Your favor is really valuable. Garen simply raised his voice and said loudly. The sound spread, and almost everyone present heard it clearly. You want to buy more than 10 million worth of essence for 2 million? What a good idea. Isn't that what the Chixu sect is like? The weak preys on the strong. If they don't have enough strength, they still take good things. It would be strange if they don't get robbed by force. It's an old trick of the Chixu section. It bullies newcomers. I've seen it once before. I didn't expect it to happen again this time. It seems that you have to be careful when joining the Chixyu section, this kind of sect that preys on the weak and the strong has no mercy at all. Join it? It's not interesting either. The energy masters deliberately did not hide their voices and started to jeer. They just said a few words. Normally they dared not speak out when they were bullied by the three major sections. Now that they got the opportunity, they naturally wanted to give him a good scolding. It would be different if it were us Juxiao. The disciples of our Juxiao sect are the most united. Unlike Qi Shui's powerful weapon masters, none of them have any sense of identity with the section. Once something big happens, they will probably run away to avoid disaster as soon as possible. More, a female mechanic from Juxiao said loudly on purpose. Wade had no intention of stopping her. March stood among the disciples with an ugly face. These two idiots, he directly hated Yiling and Joey, and even Garen. The rest of the disciples also felt aggrieved. After Jia Long's announcement, senior brother Yu Yu's reputation was definitely spread. You can't handle even small things well, Yu Yu's eyes turned cold. You've got the guts. Yiling and the other two looked livid in front of Garen. They didn't expect that Garen didn't have any scruples about offending anyone and just started to declare loudly. Most energy masters have long lifespans. At level 4, it is normal to live hundreds of years. To offend a master like March for such a trivial matter, Garen's behavior is simply a way to die. I feel like my life is too long. Don't think that I can't deal with you just because you're from the same sect. If senior brother Yu Yu wants to kill you, there are as many as 800 ways to kill you, Yiling said harshly. Then let him kill me. Garen directly spread his hands. You're welcome, come on, kill me as much as you like. He looked indifferent. Yiling was so angry that his face turned from green to red. I don't know where you get the confidence to not be afraid of offending senior brother Yu Yu and offending so many of us, Joey said coldly from the side. I have no confidence. Senior brother Yu Yu is so strong, how dare I offend him? In fact, if it were anyone else, I might have sold him long ago, but you too. Hey, a sneer appeared on Garen's face. Don't let me meet you outside. Yiling was so angry that his chest kept rising and falling. How dare you kill me when I meet you? Have you forgotten the rule that fellow sect members cannot be maimed to death? Garen said disdainfully. Yiling turned around and left without even looking at him. But Joey looked at Garen like he was a fool. Idiot. He turned around and followed Yiling back to the team. Garen watched the two people leave, and the sneer on his face gradually subsided. It's only a matter of time before I offend these two people. It seems that we have to think of an escape route in advance, otherwise it will be really troublesome if we are caught by them. It is true that the sect has a rule that members of the same sect cannot be killed or maimed, but it is perfectly fine to injure them just for discussion. They can injure themselves first and then throw themselves to the hostile Longian section. This is the simplest method. Garen himself knows that he may not even be able to defeat Joey now, let alone Yi Zero. Each of these 5th level energy weapon masters has at least resonance level combat power, and their experimental energy weapons are generally better than his own. One level higher, equivalent to a resonance level mecha master. In addition, they themselves also have combat capabilities. Once a fight begins, level 5 will be stronger than a resonance level mecha master. Moreover, individual energy mechanics may have more than one experimental body, maybe 2, or even 3, and the combat effectiveness they produce far exceeds that of ordinary resonance mechanics. In comparison, the resonance mechanics in the black disk domain are far inferior to the energy mechanics here. Garen is never afraid of offending others, but he also won't be uncompromising for no reason, mainly because this essence is too important to him. An essence should be able to improve the attributes of his 2 standard units, that is, 4 points of agility. Such an improvement is absolutely terrifying. 4 points of agility is equivalent to consuming 60 points of potential. This is for him now. It is said to be a very huge fortune. He gently picked up the test tube, unscrewed the metal stopper, dipped some essence in it and licked it. Suddenly, an extremely spicy smell rushed into his throat, irritating the entire mouth and making it almost unbearable. In an instant, Garen felt that his body had become slightly lighter. It really works. Just a little taste of it has such an obvious effect, Garen was convinced. It's a pity that even if my physique is far superior to that of an average weapon master, it will take at least a week to completely absorb it. If I drink it all at once, even the internal organs in my stomach may be burned through. He regretfully put the stopper in place and put the test tube away again. The incident where Garen was almost forcibly bought and sold was just a small episode. The inspector waited for a while, and after more than an hour had passed for everyone to recover, he started the second phase of testing. There were only about 30 people who passed the first stage, all of whom were elites from the major schools, while there were only 2 casual people, which was completely out of proportion. Phase 2 testing, premonition. The supervisor waved his hand, and the rest of the people immediately disappeared under the silver ball, and seemed to have been teleported out. All the red beams disappeared, and most of the people disappeared. The flat ground below the entire silver ball suddenly became much deserted. In the second phase of the test, you can get some resources and things inside. I will determine the deduction ratio of the resources collected based on your performance test results. The resources deducted are not collected by myself, but by my daily life as a ghost mothership. Operation Consumption. Don't worry, the inspector said calmly, while looking at Rula March and Wei Di. The results of the 3 of you last time were okay, and the deduction can be reduced to 40%. The 3 of them nodded slightly to show their understanding. Sanya glanced at Garen, who was not far away. His face remained motionless, and his lips directly transmitted the message to the people around him. Keep an eye on the one named Garen. Get the essence from him as soon as it leaves the mothership. Don't let Longian's people seize the opportunity. Okay, senior brother. The people around Yiling nodded heavily. A wealth of more than 10 million, that's it? Even for them, this amount of money is still a huge amount. Their normal daily consumption is only tens of millions a year. Now it is more than 10 million yuan of good things. If they hadn't already booked it in March, they themselves wanted to take action. Among Qi Shui's people, only one frowned slightly, not wanting to get involved. This man's face was slightly dark, as if he had used something to disguise himself, and his hair and eyebrows were all pitch black. His body was wrapped so tightly that he couldn't even tell the difference between male and female. He stood inconspicuously in the middle of the team, and no one took the initiative to talk to him. He seemed to be forgotten all the time. After arranging the disturbance caused by the episode, Yu calmed down and looked at Wei Di and Rula. This second test is the real actual combat test and the key to widening the gap. The last reward was genetic essence, which really made him a little excited, but this time the reward was completely different from before. The second phase of the test will select the corresponding alien animal gene transplant surgery based on the results. The inspector's voice sounded calmly. Everyone has a separate space. The longer you persist, the better things you can get. You can control it yourself. If you are not careful at this stage, you will die. People will die. Garen's heart trembled, and he turned to look at the others. Most of the remaining energy masters are mentally prepared. They are not surprised when they hear this. Maybe they are surprised and they don't show emotions. Only a few people had narrowed eyes, as if it was their first time here. Okay, let's start the second test. As soon as the inspector's voice fell, an endless darkness shrouded everyone. Garen felt his eyes go dark and couldn't see anything. He seemed to have lost his vision all of a sudden. He couldn't see even a trace of outline light around him, only darkness. Is this the second test? Garen felt that the sounds he heard in his ears were quickly moving away, and he couldn't see anything. The only thing he could rely on was his hearing. He had received this kind of training in the world of secret martial arts, and many secret martial arts had similar training. He tried the instruments and lighting equipment he carried, but they were of no use. They all failed, as if no light could exist in this space. It's amazing. Garen sighed in his heart. Even in the darkest place, there is still a faint light to see the outline, and the lighting equipment is not even used. Chi! Suddenly, a sharp object pierced straight from the front. There was no sound of wind, no breaking of the sky, and it only took 1,000th of a second from the time it appeared to when it reached the surface of Galleon's skin. But as if predicting the future, Garen rolled sideways dangerously, and with the sound of his clothes flying, he narrowly avoided the piercing blow. The piercing object appeared suddenly and disappeared suddenly. Garen fell to the ground with a bang. Because he used too much force, he couldn't control the strength in order to avoid the danger as quickly as possible. Even just a moment ago, his muscles and ligaments were slightly damaged. What was that just now? Was it a test? Doubts flashed through Garen's mind. Tisk. A new attack has arrived. This time it's not one, but two. Garen could clearly feel two sharp objects piercing his chest, heading towards him lying on the ground. Gilu rolled away from the place, with two crisp sounds, and two crisp crashes were heard from the place where Garen was. There is no sound of wind, no light, and no equipment or instruments can be used. Is this level a test of sensitivity to touch and changes in airflow? Garen quickly got up, and the skin on his back suddenly appeared with small pimples, and three sharp piercings in the shape of a triangle were pierced from behind. Coming at high speed, silently. And this time the speed is much faster and more stealthy than before. If you switch to an ordinary weapon master this time, unless you are a fighting master or a master who has undergone such special training, otherwise there is no way you can survive unscathed in this environment. Without all kinds of energy weapons, equipment, and instruments, energy mechanics can only rely on their own strength to avoid danger. This kind of test is the real test of a person's qualifications. This time, even Garen tensed up his whole body, trying his best to maintain the best induction state, and suddenly rushed forward to the right. G. There was a violent friction sound under the feet, and there was a faint smell of burning from the soles of the shoes and the ground. Garen only felt three sharp airflows flash past his left arm. Just when the airflow touched his arm, he felt a burning pain. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 989. From the first step, to the next two, and then to the third, it should gradually increase. A thought flashed through Garen's mind. If you just dodge like this, sooner or later you will be blocked and there will be no way out. You must find a way to test this attack. Garen rolled forward and leapt forward. Four sharp air streams passed over his head, cutting off several hair strands and slowly falling down. 5 ways. While thinking silently in his mind, Garen carefully felt the direction of the attack of the 5 air currents. Concentrating and holding his breath, the power of his true martial arts realm was finally revealed. The 5 senses are like bright mirrors that reflect all movements in the outside world in the mind, showing every detail. In an instant, 5 sharp air currents appeared out of nowhere, shooting from Garen's back towards the top speed, dragging out long air current lines in the darkness. It's now. Garen's eyes narrowed, his body suddenly turned sideways, and his right hand slashed down hard like a knife. Crack! The sharp air pierced the air, and when it passed by Garen, it was hit hard by Garen's hand knife in an instant. There was a scream, and the sharp airflow actually made a scream like a living creature. Is he alive? Garen was slightly startled. He didn't have time to think about it. This moment seemed to have stirred a hornet's nest. In an instant, more than a dozen sharp airflows suddenly hit from the front and back directions at the same time. The speed actually improved to a higher level than before. Snort. With a cold snort, Garen's body suddenly spun like a top, easily avoiding the invasion of more than 10 sharp auras from the front and back. But then, more than 10 auras joined the attack, and together with the ones in front, it was close to 30. They divided into 4 groups and actually began to attack Garen from 4 directions at the same time. Now even Garen was a little unable to withstand it. Time passed by, and Garen avoided the constant invasion of the 4 air currents again and again. The speed of these air currents was astonishingly fast, and the tips of them would be injured if they touched, and they were extremely sharp. There were more than 30 sharp airflows, and even Garen could no longer resist them purely by relying on his body. Cold energy radiation. Turn on. In an instant, a layer of cold blue mist spread over a 20-meter radius with Galen as the center. This is the freezing energy of the cold hell peacock technique. In addition to affecting the speed of creatures and reducing their life activities, it also has the effect of confusing creatures and confusing their minds. Sure enough, as soon as the cold air came out, the speed of these airflows suddenly slowed down, and their movement trajectories could also be seen slightly. Galen observed carefully and discovered that these air currents were actually black creatures that looked like loaches. Their heads were extremely sharp, their bodies could be twisted at will, and they could use force to jump when they moved, just like flattened springs. Launch yourself instantly, using your head as a spike to break through everything in front of you. Through the deceleration of the cold air, he could deal with the attacks of these black loaches with a little more calmness. Whoosh! A black loach passed by Garen's ear. At this moment, Garen stabbed with lightning with one hand. Wan Zhen is destroyed. The explosive power increased by half in an instant, and Garen's fingernails pierced into the middle of the loach's body. Bang! The body of the black loach suddenly collapsed and dispersed, and turned into wisps of black energy, which quickly dispersed and wrapped around the other black loaches. All of a sudden, the speed of the other black loaches actually accelerated slightly. Garen's heart was frightened, but his movements were not slow at all. Use the only method of Wan Zhen Gong, destruction, to continuously and accurately kill these black loaches. Bang 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 bang. The sound of continuous loach collapse continued to sound, but as the sound continued, the speed of the remaining black loaches became faster and faster, becoming more and more strange. They no longer shuttled in a straight line, but with a faint arc. This made Garen's dodge somewhat powerless. Destroyed. Suddenly, the finger that Galen pointed out actually missed, which made him pause slightly. He saw the loach in front of him turn a corner and shoot directly towards his right eye. Destroyed. The terrifying effect of Wan Zhen Gong finally manifested itself. At this moment of emergency and excessive force, Garen was able to change the direction of his move again, burst out the second devastating move, and once again caught up with the black loach. Unexpectedly, the black loach flicked its tail, causing faint ripples to appear. It swung faster, avoided Garen's fingertips, and continued to shoot directly at Garen's right eye. Amazing, Garen was shocked. I don't believe it. It's just a black loach. The third time he changed his move, Wan Zhen Destruction used it again, and his fingertips narrowly caught up with the tail of the black loach. Unexpectedly, the black loach suddenly accelerated with a flick of its tail. It suddenly shook off its fingertips and almost turned into a black line. Its speed instantly surged to 3 times that of the original black loach. Can you also change your moves to speed up? Garen had no time to react. The black loach in his eyes broke through the freezing blue mist and headed straight for his right eye. In almost 1/1000th of a second, he suddenly used the cold snow technique all over his body. The 8th level skills and cold energy radiation are instantly combined. A circle of faint blue ripples spread out with Galleon as the center. The ripples swept across the black loach's body, reducing its speed to a considerable level. But Garen still couldn't take action. In just a short moment, his extremely pure Wan Zhen Kung Fu killing technique exploded 3 times in a row, but was all thrown away by Black Loach. If it were an ordinary weapon master, he would have been shot and injured long ago. Even a 5th level weapon master can only rely on the force field to resist, let alone compete with these black loaches with skills like this. In desperation, Garen had no time to dodge, so he could only turn his head and face sideways. Chi! The black loach passed through the side of his face, bringing out a little blood. Fortunately, due to the double cold deceleration, Garen had time to relax, and the black loach only scratched Garen's cheek. There's something weird about this black loach, Garen almost fell into the trap. He immediately observed the other black loaches carefully and found that the others were far less powerful than the one just now. Obviously it is very likely that he is the boss of this group of black loaches. If you can kill that guy, you may be able to pass this level. Garen's thoughts quickly changed. With his current state and physical fitness, Wanzhen Shatter can be used continuously without worrying about the sequelae. It's just that the power of Wanzhen Gong is not its lethality and destructive power, but its compatibility. It is not the most powerful fighting skill, but it is the condensation of many basic common things in Garen. According to his speculation, unless the law is followed, different universes with very different rules, otherwise similar universes can be rebuilt without losing their skills, and Wanzhen Gong is completely compatible. It's just that as a killing technique, it's still too weak. In the dark space, Garen's body turned and moved at an extremely fast speed. In the large blue mist around him, more than a dozen black loaches were like more than a dozen black threads, cutting and rotating around him at high speed. There are faint ripples on the tails of these loaches. The ripples seem to be formed by air, but they also seem to be shuttled in the current. This way of exerting force, Garen's 5 senses were very keen. While constantly looking for opportunities, he vaguely noticed that the way these black loaches exploded with force was somewhat strange. Interesting. For the time being, he could still withstand the attacks of the black loaches. Garen simply began to observe how these black loaches could explode with such terrifying power. The ripples began to slow down in his eyes. The powerful memory ability and powerful intelligence value allowed Garen's energy mark to operate at high speed and began to analyze the movement patterns of these loaches. Soon, pieces of data flowed through Garen's mind like lightning. These digital data may not mean much to ordinary energy masters, but to a martial arts master like Garen, the digital data contained in them has been completely automated into each individual. Achievable ways of exerting force. This kind of ripples Garen had a vague understanding in his heart. Outside the dark space, the inspector touched his beard on his chin and looked quietly at a huge spherical screen in front of him. It densely displays the status of all the participants in the dark space. His eyes were always focused on observing the 3 captains of the 3 major factions. At this time in March, in the quiet space, a blue film slowly lit up around the body. More than 30 black loaches kept hitting the blue film from all directions, and from time to time, little blue light spots exploded. It looked like extraordinarily beautiful. March's demeanor was natural and relaxed, and there seemed to be no pressure at all. In the dark space of Wei Di, he happened to slap his hand with one hand, and with a bang, a large piece of yellow halo lightning shot out. Accompanied by the sharp sound of birds, the last few black loaches were directly defeated and disappeared. A black figure slowly walked out of the darkness and stood in front of him. Is this the second paragraph? This is pretty good. The inspector nodded slightly. In such a small place, there are still people who can enter the second stage so quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if they were in the central sect, but it is already pretty good in Kitsumi Prefecture. Another man's voice slowly sounded beside the inspector. Indeed, the inspector nodded. Being able to defeat the Black Thread Worm and enter the second stage means that he can be considered a middle-level disciple in a central sect like Nebula. This Wei Di is very talented. After all, he is a top disciple of the third-level section. This achievement is not an exaggeration. The voice sounded again. But the second stage ends here. No one in such a small place can pass the second test. It's not bad to be able to get the Black Worm smoke. It is a good thing that can increase the calculation speed. It is also used to stabilize the brain. That's right. For the energy masters here, it is a precious resource that has no price at all. The inspector nodded in agreement, shifted his gaze, and saw that some dark spaces were empty. The participants in the space had completely failed, and were directly ejected from the ghost mothership. The only ones left on the big screen were still active. A handful of more than a dozen. Among them, the Juxiao sect has 6, the Longian sect has 3, and the Chixiu sect has 5. One of the spaces slightly caught the overseer's attention. This mechanic master he landed in the space where Garen was beforehand and frowned slightly. The level of fighting is very high, it has reached the level of water mirror, and it seems that no one has guided me to reach it. The qualifications are very good, the voice sounded again. What? What do you think? The inspector curved his lips and smiled. Ideas. If he can break through to the second stage, maybe I can consider giving him some pointers, but it's still a little early, the voice said lightly. After all, the roots of our energy masters are in the mark of energy weapons. Consciousness is the foundation of all strength. Fighting skills are created in order to fully utilize all the strengths we possess. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 990. The level of Shui-Jing has almost reached the peak of ordinary people's exploration. Isn't this enough? The inspector asked. It depends on his qualifications. The inheritance level is a hurdle. If he can't pass it, everything will be in vain. That's right, the inspector nodded in agreement, but it's rare to see a little guy with such a high level of fighting, especially in a place like this. Even my fighting level has not reached this level. If this little guy is lucky enough to pass the second at this stage, I'll give him a little preferential treatment. It's up to you. But I think he won't be able to pass it, if only based on his current strength, the voice replied calmly. I think it's somewhat possible, the inspector smiled. It's impossible, you can't pass it? You need at least a level 5 weapon master to pass the second stage. Your judgment is wrong. His own judgment was denied in person, and the supervisor was a little embarrassed. I hate your absolute tone the most. Anything can happen to everything in the world, so you are so sure that your judgment will not cause any accidents, he said unhappily. I may be wrong in my judgment, but the chance is 1 in 100,000, and the judgment in the martial arts realm is 1 in 10 million. If you are wrong, you call me Grandpa for a day. If I am wrong, I will call you Grandpa for a day. Do you dare to bet? The inspector pointed his finger in the sky and shouted loudly. Do you dare to lose more? I'm just asking, do you dare to bet? The inspector is famous for being shameless. Looking at the lewd smile on his face, you know that this guy must have discovered something. I won't bet with you. If I lose, I can consider the option of opening up part of the privileged library resources to this little guy, the voice said lightly. No courage, the inspector chuckled. My grandson is already your age. If you ask me to call you Grandpa if you lose, it will be really embarrassing, the voice said speechlessly. But it's appropriate for you to call me Grandpa according to your age. Isn't he just 500 years older than me? The inspector said disdainfully. Isn't it just 500 years old? Many low-level energy masters will only be 500 years old in their lifetime, and you sound like this. This kind of trajectory. Garen stared attentively at the faint ripples left by the Black Loach King's continuous tail-swinging explosion. The data calculated and detected by the energy machine imprint were quickly restored into details of each force-generating technique in his mind. The realm that was once above the King of Century after the breakthrough in the totem world has been dormant for a long time, and is finally being slowly used again. For ordinary energy masters, These power-generating skills are beyond reach, and many of them are simply incomprehensible principles. The use of chi and blood has reached an incredible level, but for a master like Garen who uses chi and blood, it is not possible. In other words, every difficulty was quickly overcome and solutions were found. The regular vortex composed of ripples, in Galen's mind, was reduced to the most exquisite details, and then recombined and restored, constantly trying new combinations. Chi. A scar appeared on Garen's shoulder. At this time, all the Black Loaches had been shattered by him, leaving only the last Black Loach King. But at this time, the movement speed of the Black Loach King had also reached an exaggerated level. Even Garen could barely see his shadow. He could only barely see the explosive ripples left by the opponent. At the same time, all force-producing structures of Garen's muscles and internal tissues, bones, ligaments, tendons, etc. began to slowly and rapidly adjust their vibrations according to the various methods Garen tried. This absolute control over oneself, the depth of control, and the level of control are the true essence of the martial arts realm. The biggest difference between a person and a martial arts master is the degree to which they can control themselves. Even if ordinary people have the same body, they can only control their own limbs and brain, but powerful masters are different. They can even transcend the outside world and control their own internal organs. Even more powerful ones can control their own endocrine and blood every moment. The flow rate, heart rate, whether the circulatory system is on or off, etc. These subtle levels of control can allow a martial arts master to use the same resources to produce incredible effects. And Galleons are like that. In this predicament, if King Black Loach does not find his breakthrough point, he may not just be injured. His high-speed battle with the Black Loach King consumes a lot of Galleon's physical strength every moment. His chest is violently breathing like a bellows, breathing a large amount of oxygen, which can be clearly heard in the entire dark space. Garen had carefully calculated that he could last for 10 minutes at most. If he still couldn't do anything when the time came, then he would be out. The resources on the Ghost Mothership are top-notch resources that are difficult to obtain among all factions. Being eliminated like this is simply unbearable for Garen. He himself knew his situation. With his body's qualifications, it would take at least 10 years to break through to level 5. If you can't find good resources to accelerate, you will be outsmarted by geniuses at the same level. As for the test in Nagateco capital, the qualification he showed was that he had reached the 3rd level of Energy Weapon Master at the age of about 20, but others thought he relied on his qualifications. In fact, he knew that he relied on his intelligence points. That is to say, he can be called a genius at the beginning, but his subsequent intellectual growth rate is far behind those of the truly top talents. After all, his high intelligence was generated through potential points. The Ghost Mothership is a great opportunity. His brain was constantly running at high speed, and the muscles in Garen's body were constantly trembling and trembling. Bang! The Black Loach King swung its tail and hit another air blast in mid-air, bursting with speed and hitting Garen directly on the head. At this moment, Garen's eyes caught the little ripples of the Black Loach King's tail. The muscles in his right hand twisted and vibrated in a strange state. Found it? Suddenly, Garen's right hand bounced up quickly, like a poisonous snake shot out of the grass, and instantly pointed at the flying Black Loach King. But the speed of the right hand is obviously much slower than that of the Black Loach King. Explosion! At this moment, Garen suddenly roared. The muscles of the right elbow suddenly twisted, as if a spring that had been tightened to the extreme was suddenly released. There was a muffled sound, and a circle of faint transparent ripples erupted behind Garen's elbow. The speed of the entire right hand suddenly increased 3 times. He clenched his fist with his right hand and fiercely chased the side of the Black Loach King. The two collided in an instant. Grumble! In a piercing scream. Boom! The fist collided with the Loach King fiercely, and then beat it into a ball of blood mist, which dissipated in the dark space. I've mastered it, Garen felt relieved. I finally mastered this explosive technique. The speed tripled in an instant, and the impact it brought was unparalleled. I just feel a slight pain on the fist surface. This move can only be used once in a short period of time and cannot be used continuously. Since I learned it from this black loach, the effect is a short-term burst of acceleration. Let's simply call it double speed punch. Garen directly named this technique. The double speed fist is learned from the Loach King's swing burst. It can exquisitely leverage huge power, accumulate it, and explode out in an instant, producing a violent and powerful acceleration effect. Of course, it must be combined with a strong physical defense, otherwise if the speed increases, your fist will collide with others, and if the hardness is not enough, it is impossible to say who will be injured first. Garen's physique is close to 5 points, far above the average level. According to his own estimation, it is considered normal among 5th-level energy masters. There should be no problem in using double-speed boxing techniques at this level as long as they are not excessive. In addition, his recovery ability is super strong. Even if he suffers a minor injury, it doesn't matter. Suddenly, a faint sound slowly came from right in front of the darkness. Garen quickly looked over and faintly saw a black humanoid figure quickly forming, standing upright in front of him, more than 2 meters tall. The human form resembles a human being wrapped entirely in black cloth, through which blurred and irrelevant outlines can be seen. He opened his hands and opened his mouth, but no teeth could be seen, only darkness, and an unpleasant sharp sound slowly came out. Ah! The sharp sound waves rushed towards Garen's front, growing from small to large, from weak to strong. Boom! Suddenly, a huge distorted sound wave shock ball was ejected from the black man's mouth, and it directly hit Garen's body in front of him like lightning. The transparent sound wave ball distorted the air, and the light could only be seen for almost an instant before it landed directly in the middle of Garen's chest. Bang! He was hit hard and flew backwards. He vomited blood in mid-air. When he landed, he staggered back to cushion himself and almost rolled to the ground. Another use of a killing technique, Garen was not surprised but overjoyed. He could clearly feel that the black man on the opposite side was obviously using a huge sonic attack technique that relied on his strong physique. Others may just look back and sigh, but he is different. He has a strong physique and terrifying resilience. Coupled with the top level of martial arts, he can quickly find out the secrets of this technique, so he may be able to use it as a weapon. For personal use. In this closed dark space, long one-on-one battles completely gave me an environment where I could focus on my thoughts without any distractions. His heart moved slightly. After Garen was attacked by the sonic attack at first, he saw the black man open his mouth for the second time, so he cautiously moved away, trying to avoid the sonic attack. Boom! Another twisted sonic ball flashed past. The speed of the sonic ball was so terrifying and its concealment was so strong that Garen couldn't react at all and was hit directly. But the second time there was resistance, the muscles tightened, and the injuries suffered were much less. After being hit twice, Garen became more careful and began to slowly move around the black man. Boom! Another sonic ball shot out. Garen barely managed to dodge half of it the third time, but could only resist the other half. With a bang, he felt as if his forehead had been hit hard by a hammer. His head felt dizzy and he seemed a little dazed. Amazing! This is not only the damage caused by the impact, but also a weird vibration transmission. But the main reason is that the speed is too fast and the power is too concentrated. It is impossible to prevent it and can only resist. The terrifying physique once again came into play, and he quickly recovered from his injuries. With the addition of potential points, Garen returned to his peak condition again and continued to wander around the black people. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 991. Garen carefully observed this special sound wave technique. Like the previous double speed punch, this technique seemed to mobilize all the energy and blood to participate, and then burst out from the throat in an instant, forming a terrifying sound vibration. After circling the black man for several times, Galen clearly understood the general rules and range of the black man's sonic power. Bang! He narrowly dodged a ball of sound waves in advance and disappeared silently into the darkness behind him. Garen took a deep breath and turned a little pale. The speed of the sonic ball was too fast, and he could only dodge it once every 2 times. He would not be able to improve if he tried to improve it. This technique seems to be an upgraded version of the double speed fist just now. It seems that these two creatures are of the same origin. Garen's heart moved slightly, and he used the double speed fist technique just now. The energy and blood in his body slowly circulated, and began to gather and flow in the body like countless streams. Then slowly condense and compress it in the throat. The strange operation method causes the blood to continuously compress and compress in the throat. Garen held his breath, his face turned slightly red, and the blood vessels and veins on his face popped out one after another. At this moment, the black man turned his face, opened his mouth and suddenly charged up, about to burst out a new sound wave skill. In an instant, Garen suddenly opened his mouth and spit out a violent sound wave of air. Roar! A sharp arrow-like transparent airflow was shot toward the black man with huge sound waves. Chi! The black man's head was hit hard by the arrow before he could react. With a bang, it completely rotted into countless tiny black pieces and completely collapsed. Garen stopped panting, feeling almost faintly exhausted all over his body, but the terrifying recovery power inside his body also began to recover at an accelerated rate. Another good killing technique, the sonic technique. This time the results are pretty good. Garen slowly inhaled and exhaled with satisfaction, beginning to soothe his somewhat damaged lungs. It's not that he can't create similar techniques, it's just that he has been immersed in cultivating consciousness before and didn't think much about it. Moreover, such a complicated flow of energy and blood cannot be created in a day or two. He once in the world of secret martial arts, the maximum power of similar techniques that I learned was only 1/10 of this killing technique. They usually used sound waves to frighten and shock the enemy, and simultaneously defeated the opponent, instead of being able to directly kill them. The remaining shock kills the opponent. The gap in the middle is huge. Fortunately, martial arts lead to the same goal through different paths. The level of Jialong martial arts is extremely high. Facing such a not too complicated killing technique, it is not an exaggeration to be able to quickly imitate and master it. However, if it is an extremely advanced and complex technique, it is different. The body in this world is completely different from before. The simple operation of chi and blood can be simulated and restored, but it is different when it comes to advanced levels. Garen is completely unfamiliar with the rules of chi and blood of the body in this world, and many things can only be explored step by step and form a new system. What kind of changes will occur at each stage is completely unknown. So low-level skills are okay, but high-level skills can only be accumulated relevant experience again. If you win the second stage, you can receive relevant rewards. The inspector's voice echoed in the space. The surrounding darkness suddenly faded away like a tide. Garen's eyes lit up and he suddenly found himself standing in the Silver Sphere Square. The supervisor looked at him with a smile, his attitude was much improved than before. Garen nodded politely to the other party, then looked around and found that someone had come out of the dark space. March, Rula were there, and Wei Di, leaning against an obelisk alone, closed his eyes and meditated. Among them, Rula actually looked vaguely injured, which made Garen's pupils shrink slightly. The black man's lethality isn't very strong, how could he be? He felt a shiver in his heart. Little guy, if you hadn't used similar skills to defeat the black people at once, you would probably still be beaten by a group of people inside now. The inspector seemed to have noticed his doubts, and smiled softly to explain through the message. Senior, what do you mean? Garen looked over puzzled and asked directly through the message. That kind of dark creature has normal attacks that are indestructible. Attacking it in other ways cannot kill it. It will continue to absorb energy, and then it will split into new individuals. The more you fight, the more you fight. If you don't use the same technique, use the same vibration frequency to kill the first mother body. Once you kill it once by other means, you will face two identical individuals the second time, for the third time, and then 8. 16, it can be split up to hundreds. The sonic power of each one can be superimposed. Hee, you can imagine that situation. The inspector explained with a teasing smile. But if you kill that kind of mother body, the resources you get are not bad. You can check your body and see for yourself. Garen was stunned for a moment, and then quickly checked his overall condition. Suddenly, he discovered that the surface of his body was actually covered with a layer of light black mist. I don't know what this layer of mist was, but it actually condensed and never dispersed, covering the surface of his skin. There was no time for him to think too much. Among the people not far away who were closing their eyes and concentrating, Yu seemed to feel something and opened his eyes. Huh, he stared at Garen in the distance in surprise. This kid actually came out. Galleon's direct refusal to sell had already made him dissatisfied. Unexpectedly, this kid who was less than 30 years old could actually pass the second floor? You must know that those who fail will be thrown directly out of the mothership and are not allowed to stay inside. This is also the key reason why there are only a few of them in front of them. He managed to hold on until 32 individuals surrounded him, which was much better than the 16 last time. The rule was to hold on until there were 16 or more for 3 seconds. This time it should be considered passed. Perhaps it was just luck that forced me to dodge successfully. March didn't take it seriously. As long as he didn't attack and kept dodging, he could delay it for a long time. In this way, he could barely pass, but he wouldn't get any rewards. He guessed that Garen had probably been hiding inside to delay the passage. Considering the boy's previous strong resilience, this is very possible. This kid is lucky. Yu looked away. He had arranged for Yiling and others to wait outside for Galleon to be thrown out. They waited and waited. They didn't go out for the time being, which allowed this kid to escape. However, Galleon's matter can only be considered a trivial matter. Even the essence of more than 10 million yuan only makes his heart flutter slightly. The most important key is the result of this second level. March's eyes moved to the other two old rivals. Wade's face turned pale. It was obvious that he was constantly attacking black people like himself, which led to a large number of divisions before he could no longer hold on and was forced to leave. I just don't know how much this guy lasted. If Ruela's strength is even worse than his own, he shouldn't be stronger than him. Sanyu analyzed in her mind, her eyes moving slowly on the two of them. The results of the second level are related to gene transplantation, the top bloodline transformation surgery. Once you can get the first place, you can choose a suitable gene from the gene pool for transformation and transplantation. The gene pool on the Ghost Mothership will be stronger and richer than the local gene pool in Kitsumi State at the end, and a gene transplant operation, plus the value of the gene itself, is at least in the hundreds of millions, and at the very least it can be in the billions. 1 billion spar, this is an astronomical number. Therefore, throughout history, the only one who can get this kind of transformation is the single strongest disciple at the core of the section. If the others want to get the transplant, they can only start with the Ghost Mothership. This kind of expense is something that ordinary small schools cannot afford even if they go bankrupt. Not only the expense, but also the technology required. Testing over. The time seemed to be up, and the inspector slowly spoke. The ones who pass are the 4 of you. I will give you rewards one by one according to your ranking. Of course, the premise is to see what you choose. He waved his hand, and the rankings of the 4 people slowly appeared on the silver sphere. Sure enough, the first place was March, the second place was Wadey, then Zola, and the last place was Galen. 4 people lined up in a row from top to bottom. The prizes will be randomly assigned to 10 suitable numbers for you to choose from. After the selection is completed, you will be transported directly to the outside of the mothership. This test is closed, the inspector said calmly, stroking his beard. Close it? A trace of unwillingness flashed in Yu's eyes, and she stood up and faced the inspector directly. Master Inspector? Even with my scores, I still can't pass the second level and enter the third level test. There's still a long way to go. The inspector glanced at him indifferently. He had passed through many large and small states and had seen anywhere from 1,000 to 800 top geniuses. He didn't bother to pay attention to March's inquiry and just responded casually. Then I would like to ask, Lord Inspector, what standards are required to enter the third level test? He took a step forward and said loudly and unwillingly. Choose. The inspector was too lazy to pay attention to him. With a wave of his hand, a huge turntable suddenly appeared in front of the 4 people, with 10 different icons arranged on it. Master Inspector, Yu was unwilling to give in. He raised his voice again and took a step forward. He was not willing to give in. This may be the last time he is qualified to participate in the Ghost Mothership. After passing the age, he will no longer be qualified to enter here. If he still cannot be qualified to enter the third level this time, then he will be almost completely stereotyped for life. This is not something he can tolerate. He is destined to be a genius who breaks through the boundaries of the 2 hearts and enters the resonance stage of the 3 hearts. The basic level of inheritance is not his end. Unexpectedly, the inspector stopped looking at him and directly looked away, looking at Garen on the other side. Click. March clenched her fists, making a faint rattling sound as her muscles and bones squeezed and rubbed against each other, and her face looked surprisingly ugly. He has received the rewards for the second test many times. Although they are precious, they are not worth mentioning compared to the third level. The types of genes transplanted are all below the inheritance level, and only at the third level will mutant genes above the inheritance level be transplanted. Mituki, accept your fate. Those who have reached the third level at this age are not the kind of geniuses we in Hosumai Prefecture can have. Hey, such talents have already entered the big sects in the central city, and they will still stay in a small place like ours. You think too much, Rula gloated and sarcastically said. You shut up. March Hanshung glared at Rula. Rula's smile froze and her expression changed. Who do you think you are? You want me to shut up? Your master Juyu will be the same in the future. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 992. The top second heart disciples like them among the 3 major sects have already begun to become disciples in advance. They are considered disciples who have been booked by some inheritance level teachers within 3 hearts. There are constant disputes within the section. An elite top disciple like Yu, who is almost certain to enter the 3 hearts, has naturally already decided to belong to the sect, and his teacher is a powerful person with the nickname of Giant Territory General in Chixu section mechanic. These 1,000-year-old monsters from the previous generation are all powerful and extremely hidden. The 3 elders also belong to this level. However, the 3 elders are all on the record that they will not fall down. The true background of a sect is naturally not easily revealed on the surface. Therefore, no one knows the abilities of veteran weapon masters like General Juyu. What is the strength, but it is definitely above the inheritance level. The choice is complete. Wei Di had finished choosing at this time. His body suddenly turned into a stream of light and shot towards the sky, disappearing instantly. Only then did March and Rula regain their momentum of confrontation, and each began to pick out their own carousels. Garen was currently staring at the turntable in front of him. The moment he saw the carousel, a voice sounded in his heart. The voice told him that he had the worst grades, so he could only choose the worst gene transplant and other items. He himself also knew that he had taken a trick route. The right way should be to continuously attack black people. The longer he persisted, the more black people entered the stage, the higher the score would be, instead of using tricks to defeat the black people at the beginning. So after reading the evaluation criteria, he also knew that he didn't have many choices. Look at the turntable in front of you. The large white jade-colored turntable was almost as tall as his height. It was evenly divided into 10 equal parts, each with an icon of a different item engraved on it. There is only one gene transplant at the top. Red Eagle gene. It can grow to a maximum of 5 levels of genes. Low level, the amplification effect is a maximum increase speed of 2 levels, and can be superimposed with secret skills. Galen is not very tempted by this gene transplant. He knows that this thing can only be transplanted once in a lifetime, and he must not make a hasty decision. Although the ordinary mechanics can't afford the transplant, those who can do it are absolute geniuses and wealthy children. Once they enter that circle in the future, this low-level gene will suffer a lot. Not only will their abilities be inferior to others, but they will, even when encountering higher-level hawk genes, they will be instinctively suppressed to eliminate this amplifying effect. So even though he knew that this gene transplant was very rare, Garen still didn't make a choice. Looking away, his eyes fell on other items. Others are some one-time powerful items, or some rare technical information, and there is even a technology for manufacturing powerful energy mark. Of course, technology is technology. Without raw materials, nothing is useful. Moreover, you don't need to think about the difficulty to know that it is very scary. Little guy, you have to think about it. Suddenly a voice sounded in Garen's ears. It was the inspector. Garen glanced in the direction of the inspector and found that he was indeed looking at him kindly. The voice continued to ring in his ears. Even if the gene transplant is the lowest level, it will have a huge impact on your physique. It will improve your average physical fitness at once. I won't talk about the high-level ones, but even the low-level ones may encounter better suppression in the future. But what kind of people are able to transplant genes? You have to know that even the 3 of them in March, what they can choose is no different from yours. They are all the lowest level genes. Are they all at the lowest level? Garen's heart was moved. He originally thought that the other people would be much better than him, but he didn't expect that they were all the lowest level gene transplants. Gene transplantation is an enhanced type of transplantation without any sequelae. It can transform the physical level of the energy mechanic at one time, and at the same time, it can also give the energy mechanic a good innate ability. For energy mechanics who have not had gene transplantation, the advantage will be it's very huge. Originally, you were not qualified to choose this. This is a special reward for you who can unexpectedly pass the second level at your age. Don't miss it, the inspector further explained to Garen. Garen took a closer look at the rest of the things and items. Among them were a very tempting combination of genetically modified fluids, precious low-level secret arts materials, manufacturing methods and processes for high-level energy weapon marks, and some biochemical pools that could be modified and improved. And the rare materials of the test bench, these are good things that can only be found but cannot be obtained, but he believes that the inspector has no conflict of interest with him and will never harm himself for no reason. I choose. He stretched out his hand and finally clicked on the top item of Red Eagle gene transplantation. The moment his finger touched that item, Garen's eyesight went dazzled, and he suddenly felt weak all over his body. Suddenly, it seemed as if a huge amount of electric current poured into his body from his fingertips. This electric current was not strong, but it brought an unparalleled numbness and dizziness. His consciousness suddenly sank, and he fainted completely. Whoosh! Outside the Ghost Mothership, March-Rula and Wade's 3 teams were divided into 3 groups, and they were floating in mid-air on flyboards. You win the game this time, next time, Rula snorted coldly, turned around and flew away with the few remaining people. There are only a few people left among the group he brought, and they will definitely be punished if they go back, which makes him hate March deeply. This bridge is finally closed. Wei Di had always looked indifferent and didn't know what he had chosen. When he saw Rula leaving, he nodded politely to Sanyu, turned around and flew away with his intact Juxiaoman. Only March and others remained on the edge of the mothership. What about the kid's genetic fluid? March was furious. After all, he still failed to seize the last chance and felt extremely unhappy. At this moment, I recalled the unpopular guy in Garen and asked immediately. Yi Ling shook his head. Not out yet. Not out yet? It seems that he chose genetic modification. This idiot, we all only have the lowest modification. What kind of genetic choice can the last kid have? Sanyu sighed contemptuously. It's a pity that he didn't choose. Forget the other things, Yi Ling, you leave a few people behind, then you can get the things and sell them, we will take 50%, and the rest can go. He turned and flew away. It's just that Yi Ling and Joey plus 2 energy masters stayed behind, waiting for Garen to come out. Garen had made March lose such a big face, and it was hard to get over it without giving him a lesson. Not to mention the tens of millions of genetic modification fluids in his hands. Watching March and others gradually disappearing into the sky, Yi Ling looked at Joey, a little wary of the other 2 people who stayed behind. The 2 of them also joined together and stood far away. Are you sure that Garen is just a newcomer? How did he pass the second test? She was a little surprised. There must be a secret to this abnormal phenomenon, he, the old method. Joey smiled evilly and lowered his voice. It hasn't been used for a long time. Have you debugged it yet? Yi Ling glanced at the 2 energy masters in the distance warily and asked in a low voice. No problem. The day before yesterday, I recorded information from Rula, who had not turned on the force field defense. Otherwise, how do you think senior brother March was able to sneak attack on Rula and the others? If I hadn't secretly sold the information to March, who would have done it this time? I really can't tell who will win or lose, Joey chuckled. We must be careful and careful again. That thing is the biggest support for our rise. We must not lose it. Yi Ling was a little dissatisfied with Joey's misuse of it. I know, don't worry, nothing will happen. Joey took out a small black button-like object in his hand. The silver light on the surface was fleeting and inconspicuous. If you didn't look carefully, there would be no sign at all. This is the mysterious treasure that he and Yi Ling got after encountering an adventure in a ruins and barely surviving death, the memory recorder. It can record and excavate the memory of any creature without force field defense in an extremely concealed situation. Even Rula, who is at the top of the 5th level, fell into this trick, and Joey used this trick to get a good price. The 2 of them were originally just ordinary energy masters. They relied on this to accumulate a large amount of resources and continuously improve, and then they reached the current level. When that kid comes out, let's try using this to illuminate him. Such weird and unexpected energy masters usually have secrets, and they don't have enough strength to protect the secrets themselves. They are the best resources to obtain. Obviously this isn't the first time he's done this. Just be careful and don't get noticed by those 2 people. Yi Ling nodded lightly. Don't worry, you won't be discovered, Joey chuckled. Slowly opening his eyes, Garen felt as if his whole body had been severely run over by a giant truck. Everywhere on my body hurts, I have no strength anywhere, and even if I try to move, there is no response. He looked up at the sky. This was still the original silver ball square, but he had changed from standing to lying down now. The transplant was successful. Welcome to come again next time. I won't take your deduction. The inspector's voice rang in his ears. The old man's face appeared at the edge of Garen's field of vision, looking down at him, as if he was observing something. Yes, the transformation is very successful. Although there are some messy radiation biological transformations in your body, there is no conflict between the 2. Don't worry, it will not affect your original plan. However, your original transformation is too low level. Apart from recovery, except for being stronger, it has no other effect, the inspector said with a look of contempt. Garen was convinced, and naturally knew that he had completely failed to see the power of the secret weapon of birth, and just thought it was an ordinary radiation transformation. Fair enough. He opened his mouth and wanted to speak, but he didn't even have the strength to speak. With the Red Eagle transformation, don't underestimate it. It is just a low-level gene, but it is one of the most cost-effective low-level cheap genes on the mothership. If you have those 3 months, Rula and Wade can choose this, finally I must have chosen this. Although the Red Eagle gene is only a low-level gene with an upper limit of 5 levels, the increase is the most cost-effective speed, and it is 2 levels. Of course, this cannot be increased by 2 levels from the beginning, and it will take time. Perfection and growth will completely reach the 2-level peak in about 100 years. This increase is not much worse than some intermediate genes. And the intermediate genes require less than 200 or 300 years, so you can't even think about reaching the peak. Yes. Compared with many intermediate genes, Red Eagle's average physical fitness is slightly lower, and the increase is not much different, just 1 or 2 levels. An intermediate gene requires at least 1 billion crystals. The price of the stone, boy, you've made a lot of money this time. The inspector chuckled. It was only 1 or 2 levels. Speaking of which, how could Garen not know that this thing was simply the lowest level, but it was better than nothing. Garen could only blink his eyes to express his gratitude. Until now, he still couldn't tell that the old man must have had a hand in this. Although he didn't know why the other party helped him like this, it was obvious that he had no ill intentions. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 993. Your computing power is basically acquired, and your qualifications are ordinary. It would have been a miracle to be able to enter the inheritance level in your lifetime. Now with this gene transplant, this is something that many inheritance levels may not have, because the transplantation period only lasts so long, and this thing is so rare that even if a master can obtain it, it is difficult for him to have the skills to transplant it perfectly, so after your success this time, it is almost certain that you will enter the inheritance level within 200 years. The inspector comforted him. Have a good rest. In about 15 minutes, your body will naturally recover and reach normal state, and it will automatically send you out at that time. He turned and left, but after walking a few steps, he turned back. My old man forced you to get your genes. Your grades wouldn't have qualified you for gene transplantation, but for me. The old man kept chattering and kept stating that without his gene transplant, there would be no chance of it happening. Apart from constantly thanking him, Garen could only wait helplessly for his body to recover. At the same time, take an inward look at your current physical condition. The Red Eagle transplant did seem to have little impact on the body. Garen felt that his body was only slightly stronger, but other than that there were no other abnormal changes. But when his eyes moved to the attribute column, a strange feeling suddenly shook his body slightly. At the back of the attribute bar, there is an option to add points. Garen is already extremely familiar with his attribute skill bar. He still has 30 potential points left, but he can find no other use for them except for recovering his body. The Energy Master's consciousness cannot be upgraded with potential points at all. It seems that there are 2 systems at all, and attribute points require too many potential points. You can't even see a bubble if you throw 30 points into it, so you might as well keep it. Restore your body. As for other skills, with Galleon's current intelligence and calculation power, the potential points that need to be improved are simply not enough because the level is too high to add them. He can learn it by himself in just a few strokes without needing it. It is too simple. Compared with when he first entered the world of secret martial arts, he is in a completely different state. He is now a 4th level energy master, and his calculation and learning abilities are extremely strong. General skills are not difficult for him. You can remember things at a glance. Developing his brain to his level is beyond what ordinary people could imagine before, and even the basic skills and knowledge points of an energy mechanic are beyond what ordinary people can handle. But now, Garen was shocked to find that there was another option in his attribute column that could be improved. Red Eagle Gene Low-level gene, current increase speed, 0. The upper limit is a 2-level increase in movement speed. The gene chain is extremely complete and can be improved. If it could only be improved, galleons might not be of much importance. But at this moment, he had a strangely familiar feeling in his heart. This sense of familiarity was exactly the same as when he was improving his secret martial arts in the secret martial arts world. The inspector finally left after muttering for a while, and Garen finally couldn't hold himself back anymore and began to try to verify whether his feelings were true. His eyes quickly fell on the Red Hawk gene. Aha! The entire option suddenly became blurry. The potential points disappeared a bit, and the blurred options also changed. Red Eagle gene add 1, low-level gene, current increase speed, level 1. The upper limit is a 2-level increase in movement speed. The gene chain is extremely complete and can be improved. Garen suddenly felt a floating sensation all over his body, as if he could soar into the sky just by shaking his hands. Only a little wasted, Garen glanced at the potential points. There were still 29 points left, and he felt happy. Come again. His vision condensed, and then became blurry again 3 seconds later. The attributes of the Red Eagle gene suddenly became clear again. This time, it really lived up to Galleon's expectations and was improved again. Red Eagle gene add 2, low-level gene, current increase rate, level 2, has reached the upper limit. The integrity of the gene chain is extremely high. If it continues to be strengthened, the stronger state of the gene fragment will be automatically selected, and there is a certain probability of returning to the ancestor and strengthening it into a Blood Eagle. Returning to the Blood Eagle, Garen finally knew where his familiar feeling came from. This was basically the feeling he had when he used potential points to improve his totem creatures in the totem world. The potential point seems to have the strongest effect on such a creature, and now that Garen himself has simply transplanted this gene, such an improvement is even more exciting. It only took 2 points to increase the band limit. It can be imagined that this Red Eagle is indeed the lowest level of genetic modification. But what if it is a Blood Eagle? Garen was looking forward to it, and his eyes fell on the Red Eagle icon. He has heard about Blood Eagles. They are powerful ancient creatures with mouths like syringes. They make a living by sucking the blood of living things, so they are called Blood Eagles. This creature was considered a ferocious beast in ancient times. Although its specific combat power is not very clear, it is definitely stronger than the lowest level Red Eagle. I took a look at the remaining potential points. After going to 2 points, there were still 28 points. In the Ghost Mothership here, if any abnormality is discovered, it will be troublesome. It is better to try it again. After going back, he suppressed the urge to try and waited quietly for his body to fully recover. The numbness in the body recovered very quickly, and in less than 10 minutes, Garen was able to slowly support his body. He felt a faint hint of strength gushing out from inside his body, and the surface of his skin seemed to become a little harder. It's just not reflected on the property bar. The time has come. Okay, little guy, I'll see you later when you have the chance. The inspector's voice came from afar. Garen bowed his head respectfully in the direction of the voice to express his gratitude. Whoosh! The surrounding scenery suddenly faded, and he suddenly found that he had appeared in the air outside the Ghost Mothership. There seemed to be an invisible force field supporting him, and he was slowly sinking. Below is a lush green pine forest, and the distant west sun shines on the body, half golden and red, half as usual, and half of the body feels warm. The ghost mothership on the side above the head suddenly trembled, and then the entire huge hull silently accelerated slowly, rushing forward into an invisible entrance with transparent ripples, and disappeared from Garen's eyes in less than a few seconds. I don't know how many years it will be until the next time it appears, Garen sighed. The owner of this ghost mothership didn't know what his intentions were, so he was spreading favors and gifts everywhere. Suddenly, the soul seed in his mind suddenly shook, emitting a faint radiance that completely enveloped the entire brain. Outside of his mind, there seemed to be something sharp trying to force its way into his brain. Who? Garen was suddenly startled, and turned around to look in the direction of the soul seed's induction. Before he finished speaking, he quickly turned around and moved away from his original position. And the moment he stepped aside, an invisible spike penetrated fiercely from there and quickly disappeared into the air. It only appeared for a moment. After the spike penetrated, it brought out a large amount of intense cold air, and even Garen was slightly numb from the cold. "Hey, there's a moment," Joey's voice came from not far away, and the figures of him and Yiling floating on the flyboard were revealed. At this moment, Garen slowly stepped onto the ground in the pine forest. He looked up at the two people in the sky. "Is it you? Hand over the thing, the essence of the genetic modification fluid." Joey looked down at Garen condescendingly. "Do you think it's possible?" Garen sneered. "You can try not to pay." Joey also sneered. "In this world, the jungle is strong. You have obtained resources that you cannot protect, and you still want to keep them for yourself? I really don't know if you are mentally ill or just a natural fool. Okay, stop talking nonsense, hand over your things and we can let you go back alive." Yiling frowned and said in a low voice. Garen frowned, feeling something was wrong. He began to be wary of his surroundings, and the environment around him always made him feel a little uncomfortable. "If you don't listen, it seems you really want to die." Joey exhaled, and their flying board slowly landed at the same time, standing on the ground. Click. He loosened the bones of his fist, making a crisp sound, and shook his neck slightly. His whole body seemed to expand slightly with this movement. Yiling on the side gently slapped Joey on the back with one hand, and seemed to pull out a slender needle-like thing from his vest. "1 minute. Joey grinned and held up a finger. Boom. There was a loud thunderous noise, and a white cloud exploded where Joey had been. It was a huge airflow caused by moving too fast and shaking the air. Garen's pupils suddenly shrank, he raised his arms and crossed them in front of his chest. At the same time, he moved his body to the left, using the 8th layer of red snow skill all over his body. A large amount of cold air quickly mixed with cold energy radiation and moved toward the surrounding area of 20 meters. Diffusion. But it was too late. In an instant, a huge impact hit him hard where his arms were folded. Bang. One punch. Joey appeared in front of Garen, maintaining a punching posture. But Garen was hit hard by the punch and flew backwards. The muscles and bones between his arms actually dented a clear fist mark. With a loud bang, Garen's back hit an extremely hard giant pine tree, and large pieces of bark were shattered and flew apart, revealing the white bark of the trunk underneath. "Come again." Joey gave a sharp laugh and disappeared again. Bang 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 bang. There seemed to be an invisible boxer continuously surrounding Garen's side, punching hard on Garen's blocking arms one after another. The huge power continued to surge along with the terrifying cold air, and even Garen's strong physique began to be somewhat unable to recover. In an instant, Joey appeared on the back of Galleon again. His back was arched, his hands were clasped together in front of him, and an invisible force field began to gather in front of him. In an instant, it surpassed the 4th level and reached the 5th level. Vertex level. Just a little bit of breaking into the resonance stage. Photographer. His eyes suddenly lit up with a faint green light, his low roar was like a real dragon's roar, he clasped his palms together and stabbed straight towards Garen's back. The huge twisted force field continued to condense as Joey's body moved forward, pulling everything around him. Grass clippings, soil, fallen bark, and even the clothes on Yiling's body not far away were pulled and tossed around. "It's over." Yiling shook his head. Once Joey used this move, it almost meant that the battle was settled. "I was originally worried that the kid might have some trump cards, but I didn't expect that he couldn't even resist in one go." Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 994. Joey's combat effectiveness should really be at the top of level 5. Even at level 5, he is far from his opponent, not because of anything else, but because of the numerous trump card abilities hidden in Joey's hands. Among them, Shalong is one of them. This move requires continuous accumulation of momentum until it finally explodes. The speed and power will be twice the original. Twice the peak of the 5th level, she has reached the resonance stage. Even if she takes action, she must take it seriously, let alone a 4th level energy master. She was too lazy to look at the bloody scene of this palm anymore, turned around, bent down and picked up the 2 flying boards on the ground. Bang! A loud noise came from behind. Yiling paused slightly. This sound is wrong. She turned sharply. In the distance, Joey's eyes were wide open, and his palms were hit from the side by Garen's punch. The two were face to face and very close, and he could clearly see the cold expression on Garen's face. Interesting, Joey Shalong's terrifying force field hit the side of Galen, directly breaking several giant trees behind him, and then rushed out of the gap to an unknown distance. A funny smile finally appeared on his face, and he stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. The recorder can't record your content. Even my photo dragon can't destroy you in one go. You pulled me astray. Garen, you really surprise me more and more. You are not level 4, Garen whispered. Of course. Yiling and I are both at level 5. Before he finished speaking, Joey's hands suddenly spread apart, and he slashed at Garen's head like a pair of knives. Only bursts of sound could be heard in the air. Explosion, no residual image of the palm sword can be seen, which shows that the speed has reached a peak. At the same time, Joey's 10th level Chixyukong brought up violent cold air and fiercely covered the top of his sword. Die! Double speed punch, Garen roared in his heart, using the 8th level Chi Snow Kung Fu to boost his luck, but he was still retreating under the suppression of the opponent's cold air. He had just relied on the double speed punch to miss the dragon at that moment, but now the 10th level of Chixyukong can penetrate all of Joey's moves, but he can't get rid of the resistance with the double speed punch. Air waves exploded behind the elbows of both fists, and Garen faced the opponent's sword. The cruel look in his eyes flashed away. Clang! The two of them clashed head-on, blood splattered, and they flew far away. 2 deep knife marks appeared on the fists of Garen's hands, dripping with blood, but he ignored them. His chest swelled high, his mouth and nose suddenly sucked in water like a whale, and he took a deep breath. Come again! He roared and rushed towards Joey, who had just stabilized his body. The double speed fist exploded with a bang, followed by a powerful cold blast. Garen's right fist was like a sharp drill, hitting Joey's neck hard. Snort! Joey snorted coldly, his eyes also glowing fiercely. The 10-level red snow skill crazily promoted luck, gathered on his hands, and faced Garen head-on. Peng! White cold air accompanied by blood splashing. The two of them were entangled, their arms intertwined, and Garen's hand bones cracked and cracked, but he ignored them. He knew that if Joey was not forced back, it would be very difficult for him to leave here today. The energy masters on Naga planet are different from other places. The most powerful one here is the energy master himself. The relationship between Yiling and Joey is far from being as simple as it seems on the surface. It seemed very intimate. At first, Garen was only a little skeptical, but now he is half sure. Joey is basically Yiling's biological brother. Although the facial features and hair color of the two have been concealed, he has carefully distinguished them after traveling with them these days and found that there are indeed great similarities in the facial features of the two. Double speed punch. Garen threw out the third double speed punch. He felt a faint pain in the muscles all over his body, like tearing. He knew that he had hurt his body by using the double speed punch forcefully in a short period of time. Although this move is powerful, it can triple the speed in a short time and keep up with Joey's level 5 strength, but the load on the body is too heavy. Let's see how you can block it this time. Joey blocked the double speed punch and saw Garen's decline. He flashed a sinister smile on his face, stepped back again, arched his body and clasped his hands together. Photographer. With a bang, the invisible twisting force field rushed straight towards Garen, who was a little weak. This is the time. A gleam of light suddenly flashed in Garen's eyes, and a small thing appeared in his hand, and he hit the Shalong directly. Far away. That's it. Yiling, who was originally calm, suddenly changed her color. Joy, hide quickly, she suddenly shouted anxiously. But it was too late. Joey felt as if his Photosaurus had hit something head-on. Then in an instant, there was a loud bang, and an extremely powerful terrifying concussion storm swept towards his front. As if being hit directly by a 10,000-ton sea-going ship, Joey's body was thrown away by this terrifying silent force field explosion, and was shot backwards like a cannonball, breaking several giant trees in succession. Without slowing down, he disappeared deep into the forest in an instant. A large amount of blood and broken clothes were sprinkled along the way, and the whole person fell into a coma in an instant. With Galen as the center, everything within a radius of more than 10 meters was completely reduced to ruins as if a violent storm had swept through it. Joy, Yiling's expression changed drastically. He clenched his fists and stared at Garen viciously, but he was worried about his brother's safety. She stamped her foot and waved her hand, releasing a gray shadow. Kill him. Without saying a word, Yiling turned around and chased in the direction where his brother flew out. At this moment, Garen didn't even look at the exploded carton, and quickly retreated. A few kites turned over and dived into a small river not far away. With a pop, the wounds all over his body quickly froze to stop the bleeding, and his whole body swung and swam towards the lower reaches of the river like a fish at an extremely fast speed. He once stayed in the totem world at the bottom of the sea for decades, and naturally his water quality was not as strong as usual. Looking back at the grey shadow, which was following him closely, Garen snorted and ignored it. He had already made arrangements before the conflict with March. The previous battle with Joey was just to test what level his actual combat strength could reach. The results of the specific test gave him an idea. If not in an instant, the paper box was there, and he could really be defeated by Joey alone. The level 5 weapon master's killing power was really powerful. Especially people like Joey who have a lot of hidden strength. This time it was a surprise, but next time it won't be so easy. After swimming forward for a while, a giant blue wolf soon appeared in the water ahead. Garen's expression remained unchanged and he swam directly towards the giant wolf. The giant wolf showed a submissive expression as Garen approached, and took the initiative to rush under Garen and carry him on his back. Then the hair all over his body shook violently, and the giant blue wolf suddenly rushed out like a swordfish, leaving the grey shadow behind him in an instant. Gah! Grey Shadow screamed unwillingly, but was quickly left behind and disappeared in less than half a minute. This was one of the escape routes originally planned by Garen. The giant blue wolf is his experimental subject of the big bad wolf. He spent a lot of resources and technology over the years to finally take shape. This time, although he couldn't take it with him to protect himself, he allowed it to follow him and hide in the cave. In the forest. The speed of the giant blue wolf is extremely fast, 1.6 times the full speed of a normal flying board. This is just the normal speed. If the maximum speed breaks out, it is at least 3 times that of a flying board. However, the speed of the giant blue wolf is obtained at the expense of many other things, such as strength, resilience, and lifespan. This giant blue wolf is only half as powerful as the big wild wolf, and its lifespan is limited. It can only live for 50 years. As an experimental subject that can generally accompany an energy weapon master throughout his life, this lifespan is really too short. If other energy masters knew that Garen was so crazy and actually spent a lot of resources just to increase his speed, they would probably call him a madman. However, the original purpose of Galen is to sacrifice other things in exchange for speed. As long as he is fast enough and can quickly retreat in any situation, this is what he wants most. With these alone, the giant blue wolf might be overtaken by others. After all, energy masters like you had accumulated a lot of savings and had a deep foundation. But if they add another thing, it would be different. After adding the twisting seed, the giant blue wolf's speed surged. Garen estimated that it would be almost impossible for non-heritage level energy masters to achieve this speed. This has reached the limit of non-heritage level. This was the key to his daring to confront the stalemate in March. With this backup, he could quickly retreat at any time, and he would not be afraid of the siege of March and others. He originally planned to let the giant blue wolf carry him and retreat quickly as soon as he got out of the mothership, but when he saw Joey and the two of them, he paused, just to test the bottom line of his strength. The result was not much different from what he imagined. After understanding the double speed fist, his lethality has been raised to a higher level. Now his strength explodes in a short time, almost at the peak level of a 5th level weapon master. It is stronger than the original one, which can just compete with the 5th level, but it is not too exaggerated. After all, double speed fist is just a skill of low-level mutated creatures. And because Joey himself is level 5 and has many tricks, Garen will suffer a lot in a protracted battle. If he can't win in a sudden attack, he can only retreat. This is also the helplessness of leapfrog combat. You can't beat Joey head-on, and with a veteran level 5 player like Yiling, once the two of them join forces, there will definitely be no other option except running away. Fortunately, the energy weapon masters of Nagastar mainly focus on themselves, and the energy weapons are not strong as supplements. Otherwise, the grey shadow chasing behind them might really be able to catch up. We still can't win by leapfrogging, and if there are energy weapon masters from other places, they will probably let the energy weapons fight instead of doing it themselves. This may be more dangerous. Garen lay on the back of the giant blue wolf. Breathing gently, letting the body recover naturally, swallowing a piece of high-energy nutritious dried meat prepared in advance to speed up the body's recovery from injuries. I wonder how that boy Joey is doing? Hey, if he gets hit by the instant carton I have accumulated for so long, I'm afraid he will have to shed his skin even if he doesn't die. Garen swallowed the meat in his hand a few times, took a breath, and felt the body has almost recovered in such a short period of time. He looked at the bones in his hands. The broken bones had healed and grown back, but there was still a little bit of skin trauma that had not fully recovered. There are still 2 thin red lines on the wrists of both hands. This is the terrifying thing about the cold hell peacock kung fu combined with a strong physique. As long as the injury is not close to death, it is just like drinking water, and the recovery speed is astonishingly terrifying. It's a pity that I didn't have time to try out the effects of turning on the Red Eagle state. Garen regretted that he didn't use the Red Eagle state test in the end. This time I have basically formed a deadly feud with Joey Yiling. I have to practice hard when I go back. As long as I am within the sect, I am not afraid of them. After making an arrangement in his mind, Garen patted the giant blue wolf, and his speed suddenly increased again. 1 level. Wow. 1 man and 1 wolf rushed out of the river and ran directly into the forest, disappearing in an instant like blue smoke. With the genetic modification essence and the Red Eagle gene transplant, although I did not get enough points this time, the harvest has exceeded expectations. You must go back as soon as possible to avoid being intercepted by Ye Zero March and others.